Thank you very much, Neil. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can I first of all thank Joe for the invitation to come here this evening and the opportunity to visit beautiful Glenties. And the peaceful glens of Donegal are a long way from the political hurly-burly I know of Leinster House. But it's good to take a step back from that cauldron and take a look at one of the most pressing issues we face. And the turbulent tale of Irish water has at times, unfortunately I might add, fallen into the dark type of politics of intimidation that we don't want to see in Irish life. Discussions like this evening are important in threshing out ideas on how we can move forward in what is and what should be an open atmosphere. And since its very inception, Irish water has evolved, unfortunately, through secrecy, and getting information from my part as an opposition spokesperson has proved difficult and sometimes impossible, some might say. It would appear to many that it's all about spin rather than substance. And only last week I received a response from the Minister of Responsibility in this area, Minister Alan Kelly, having questioned him in the Dáil some weeks earlier about the costs associated with the borrowings by Irish Water and the interest rate associated with it, because ultimately it's the taxpayer that's meeting the cost, whether through charges or general taxation. I want to quote the response that was given to me last week in writing. The Minister said that consent had been given in 2015 for Irish Water to enter into a number of committed facilities totalling 550 million with commercial banks. Committed facilities are commercial loans. And it's in addition to the existing facility that had been raised from the National Pension Reserve during the set-up costs. The rate of these facilities, he said, and I quote, is commercially sensitive, as Irish Water is currently in negotiations in respect of further debt facilities. This could be described as a farcical position because much of taxpayers' money has already been invested in Irish Water. And accountability through questions in the Dáil and the public interest, it would appear, is being ignored, and information, it would appear, is hidden in this instance. And unfortunately, it's that type of cloak and dagger activity that has and does expose this government, or any government, more and more. And it's very far away from, in this instance, the democratic revolution that was promised by the incumbents. To get back to last week's figures and the payments and the percentages of those who had committed and honoured the bills, can I say, they do reveal, and Michael hasn't been behind the door on what he has said, the scale of the challenge ahead. 57% of households did not pay their bills. And you would ask the question, did those who did question their decision, that being the case? For what has been the most debated charge in the history of the state, the compliance rate is nothing short of abysmally low. The government, one could say, have gone into spin overdrive when they describe this as a good, steady start or a solid foundation for its progress into the future. It's my opinion that this is very far from the truth. And comparisons with household charge or water bills in the UK are deeply misleading as a result. There is no shortage, let me say, of knowledge about this bill or of its impending receipt on the part of households throughout the country. At the moment, some would say it mirrors the collapse and demise of residential property tax in the mid-90s. But the financial model of Irish Water has been cast into grave doubt. The government has introduced a charge that will actually cost it money. And I don't know of any other historic examples of that feat. Is it the first government that has introduced a tax that will be at a loss as a result? And I acknowledge, as does everybody who comes to the table or comes to this debate, and we couldn't argue against the fact that more investment is required in water infrastructure. But unfortunately, much of the extra money that has been spent in this regard has gone into the setting up of Irish Water rather than many extra cents being put into modernising the country's water systems. And in light of this backdrop, I want to focus my few words on three main areas. Firstly, what has gone wrong with Irish Water. Secondly, why I believe and our party believes we need to abolish it. and thirdly, how we can secure our water supply into the future. And I start by saying, when I talk about what went wrong with it, I don't mean to be overly political, and it's not my intention to do so, but I think I have to place the facts in front of people. The origins of Irish water, or its model, its construct, can be found well before the Troika agreement was entered into. In November 2009, 1 year before the EU-IMF agreement, Fine Gael published their New Era policy document, which called for, within it, the creation of Irish water. And let me say categorically, the EU-IMF agreement and National Recovery Plan did not sign up to the idea of setting up Irish water. Instead, Fine Gael and Labour government went against the explicit advice of its own PwC consultancy report and set up Irish water as an entity within the existing board GOSH. The government's story of a new body equipped with the expertise to centralise and coordinate planning of our fragmented water services and the systems for the water services quickly went astray. Revelations that it would cost 180 million to set up, with 80 million being gobbled up by consultants, shocked the public. The still unresolved issue of bonus payments jarred with a public struggling with the burden of fresh taxes, with the burden of new charges, with the burden of services being cut to the bone. The costs of water meters, they rose 2 to 540 million and presented a very physical reminder of the new body. An extra 700 new staff were placed upon the existing 4,000 local authority workers. And a further additional 400 staff are contracted in call centres. And in the new system in relation to call centres, people can contact a call centre in Cork, paid for by a company in Dublin, to report a problem in Offaly, which the same Offaly local authority worker will fix at the end of the day. And at the head of this charge was the minister responsible initially, Phil Hogan, who regularly threatened to cut off water supplies to those who did not pay. And that, characterised the government's bullish approach. And that in itself provoked an inevitable and hard backlash. And faced with a severe wave of public anger, it committed to a series of 14 U-turns subsequently, desperate to keep the breaking wave at bay. Deadlines were pushed back, charges were capped, allowances introduced only weeks previously were replaced, and water meters were effectively abandoned. And the Commission for Energy Regulation was sidelined. And through it all, as I said earlier, not many extra cents went into the water infrastructure itself. What we are now witnessing is the consequences of the government's spiral of U-turns as it desperately attempted to justify its decision to create Irish Water in the first place. People's trust in this entity, unfortunately for many, has been shattered. The credibility of the water, of Irish water, some would say is shot through, but is definitely in grave doubt. The government set up a body and realising its error haphazardly proceeded to entirely undermine its very basis. The financial hole at the heart of the project runs the risk that the current cap charges regime is simply the first of uneasy steps on a slippery slope. All the while we await the long-awaited Eurostat test as keenly as a Leaving Cert student awaits his results in August, or hers. And the outcome of the test, some would say, may have been dealt a debilitating blow by the latest payment figures. And even if it passed on the basis of the projections given by the government in March, it may well not pass next year based on the actual performance we see in the meantime. And if one is to look at the current rates of payment as published last week, which relate to payments up to the end of May, I might say, if that continues, the government could lose anywhere between 35 and 70 million on the charge this year. And on this basis, the whole reason for Irish Water that it can borrow independent of government and can invest in infrastructure may very well fall asunder. So what we are left with could be described as the worst of all worlds. We have water meters without conservation. We have water charges without adequate water investment. and we have a water company that doesn't have adequate water customers. The profound failure to win over the trust of the Irish people may be irreversible. The damage done to the water charges regime could be permanent. 180 million has been spent on setting up a company which itself does nothing but install meters that are not being used and send out bills. The actual work of fixing the pipes, as I said earlier, is still being done by the same people as always, in our local authorities. And because of Irish Water, there is less funding to do this than there was before. Irish Water, I believe, should be abolished. It has failed, and it should go before it does any more damage. I believe it's time to call a stop to the absurdity of the government actually losing money on this charge, and it's time to go back to the drawing board on how we can deliver water services best. There is also a broader issue that needs to be addressed. Opposition, and I, as a member of opposition, cannot be simply opposing for the sake of opposing. There needs to be credible, costed alternatives and constructive engagement. I believe it's time to press the reset button on water charges and set up a new system that the public could have faith in. A system which will deliver the investment our water network needs. And at the heart of the Fianna Fáil vision is the central belief that water, as Michael has said, is a vital natural resource. A safe, reliable water supply is an integral part of the national social and economic infrastructure of the country. This will grow in importance, as he has said also, and as many others would say, as global water resources come under more and more pressure in the coming years. And we have specific proposals to achieve the goals of a fit-for-purpose, equitable water services infrastructure. In relation to the scrapping of water charges, the botched implementation of water charges regime by the government has shook, as I said, public trust in the tariff system. We maintain our call for the immediate suspension. We think domestic charges should be introduced when the national infrastructure is brought up to the proper standards. We believe then that 3 key tests should be set by the CER in relation to bringing the system up to standard. These tests are vital in setting out our vision of what our water network should achieve. The first of those 3 is water quality. This should be based on EU Water Framework Directive standards for water quality and levels across our entire water network. Eliminating the 23,000 or all boil water notes across Ireland is obviously, as has been said by others, a critical element of this. In relation to water supply, this should be based on CSO demographic analysis of future domestic and business demand levels. Our water supply must be equipped to deal with population rises and increased business demands, thankfully. In relation to water leakage rates, we believe that reduce the leakage rates in line with the OECD average of 20%, and that has to be a priority for capital investment over a given period of time where improvements can be seen over that period, whether it's the 2021, it was said earlier, in relation to 37%, or 2027, when it should be down to 20%. We have consistently, and I as a spokesperson in Fianna Fáil have consistently opposed the creation of Irish Water. The controversy of consultancy costs, of bonuses, of overstaffing at the Super Quango has borne out our fears that were described initially. Irish Water is a management-heavy tier placed on top of an existing water services structure and has lost, as I said, the confidence of the people. It should be abolished and a new model of local delivery with national standards and planning put in its place. We believe, or we estimate, that this will cost about €177 million. However, some of the start-up costs, such as the asset management system, will be transferable into a new slimmed-down NRA-style holding company. The annual pay bill saving would be €45 million per year compared to Irish Water, excluding bonuses. The estimated cost for a slimmed-down body ranges from 9 to 13 million per annum, leading to a net savings of 32 million per annum. Under that model, the costs of abolition would be met then within 6 years. In its place, a new slimmed-down National Water Directorate based on the National Roads Authority, as said, would set national standards, capital investment planning and borrow on behalf of local authorities. Delivery would be returned to local authorities and to ensure that on-the-ground local knowledge and direct democratic accountability in the form of councillors would be perceived and in place. The new National Water Directive will be drastically slimmed down to about 100 staff, have a Oireachtas control over consultancy costs and no bonus structure. This will ensure a national coordinated approach. The fragmentation outlined by others and government spokespersons over the years, in contradiction to what we would put forward, will be directly addressed by ensuring that major projects are undertaken across county boundaries. The on-the-ground knowledge of local authorities who already deliver the service will play an important role in guaranteeing real delivery for the communities in which they reside. Water is a precious social and economic resource, as everyone agrees. Upgrading our infrastructure to make it fit for purpose must be a national priority to ensure that we have a supply that is safe, reliable and adequate for both homes and businesses. In an age of climate change, an effective supply will be a major competitive advantage. Our target is to reduce mains leakage from 40% to the OECD average of 20%, and meeting our EU Framework Directive targets for water quality and sewage treatment by 2027 must be a national priority. To achieve these clear targets, Fianna Fáil proposes a €10 billion capital investment programme over 12 years from 2016 to meet these targets. This will support some 10,000 jobs in the construction sector over the duration of the programme. This will be funded via the Strategic Investment Fund, European Investment Bank, and complemented obviously by general taxation. I believe the abolition of the failed Irish water model, the creation of a new slimmed-down delivery model, the suspension of charges until a service that delivers is achieved, and a €10 billion capital investment plan to upgrade the network for a 21st century will transform Irish water services in Ireland. And against that, and having said all of that, and given you, as I said, the background to the setting up of Irish water, why we believe it was a failure, why we believe it can't succeed, and offering credible and constructive alternatives and a means by which that constructive alternative might be put in place, I look forward to your views from the floor in response to that. Because resolving this issue is a critical challenge not only for this government but more than likely for the next one. And it's a fundamental strategic challenge for the country. And we cannot shirk our responsibilities, any of us who have the privilege of representing those whom we have gone before in the past. And we won't shirk our responsibilities, and we won't deny the opportunity to think boldly about the future of the country in this regard, because I believe it's time to get to grips with water.